All praises to the Most High, brothers and sisters. I'm your host, the Apostle Reuben of IUPR Bible Radio, podcasting out of Little Rock, Arkansas. To the people that are willing to read and study through time. As we bring the scriptures out to you, chapter and verse, podcast after podcast. Now, 1 John 3 and 4 is on the screen, and it's for a reason. So let's get into it. John writes, whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is transgression of the law. I'm going to read it again. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is transgression of the law. Now, the question is, brothers and sisters, sin is the transgression of what law? Which one? Let's go back. Let's get James 2:11. For he that said, do not commit adultery, also said, do not kill. Now if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. Now, I want you to notice adultery, kill. Those are the 10. So quickly we can understand that if you transgress the law, you're transgressing the 10. Let's go back to Let's go to Romans. Let's go to Romans, the book of Romans. Romans 2. We're going to start verse 21. Let's get that real quick. Real quick now. Romans 2:21. Thou therefore which teachest another, teachest thou not thyself, that thou preachest the man should not steal. That's of the 10. Dost thou steal? This is the question he's asking now. Thou that sayest a man should not commit adultery, dost thou commit adultery? Thou that abhorrest idols, dost thou commit sacrilege, which is worship idols? He's asking a question. Thou that makest thy boast of the law, through breaking the law dishonorest thou God. So what law would they be breaking to dishonor God? The 10. Adultery in verse 22, steal in verse 21. When you transgress the law, you're transgressing the 10 commandments. So where did they get this from? Let's go to Exodus 20. Real quick. Now, I'm not going to read all Exodus, but Exodus 20, but I'm just going to go to the key point. Exodus 20 and verse 1. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So Egypt was called the house of slavery. It's bondage is slavery. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So we're beginning the 10. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, that is in the earth beneath, that is in the water under the earth. So we're looking at the 10 here. But I want to go down to verse 8. I'm just going through the verses. Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. Now I'm going to drop on down, which is verse 12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Verse 13, thou shalt not kill. Verse 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. Verse 15, thou shalt not steal. Out of the 10. Verse 16, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Verse 17, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor. So we're looking at the 10. Now, we're going to drop on down to verse 19, and then we're going to read 19 and 20. And they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said unto the people, fear not, don't fear, for God has come to prove you, to see if you'll keep the law, and that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not. Against what? The 10 Commandments. So to sin, if you sinned, it was against the 10 Commandments. This is where Paul and James got it from. If you sin, you're breaking the Sabbath, you're killing, you're stealing, you're committing adultery, you're honoring other gods. See, you're honoring the gods that this man brought forth. And of course, when you look, this is how he looks. This is the Christ that belongs to these people, because they made him up. You can't, brothers and sisters, when you go to Daniel, we don't understand how Daniel 10. Verse 5. Then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, green garment, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass. And the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. So when we go quickly to this, is this who he's talking about? Is this who he's talking about? Does this man have the color of fine brass? Anywhere in the Bible? Or does this man have the color of fine brass? Yeah, think about it, brothers. It's not something we're not gonna glory for this. But it's certainly a difference between this and this. Once you begin to understand, his body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet and like in color to polished brass. See that arm? Brass. This man right here, he tries to draw the line at color, but the Bible mentions color. And again, with this Christ right here comes another doctrine. It does. Now let's get into it, because I didn't want this to be too long. I want to go to the book of John. The book of John. Chapter 5. I'm doing this again because John chapter 5. Verse 7. The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Pay attention. The Messiah saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, and took up his bed, and he walked. And on the Sabbath day, on that same day was the Sabbath. So he was healed on the Sabbath. The people now, this pool that was disturbed, it was disturbed on the Sabbath. But Christ healed on the Sabbath. Same thing as this pool, but I want you to pay attention. Because I'm not going to get into what they want. I want to show you this. John 5:13. And he that was healed risked not who it was. He didn't know who healed him. For the Messiah had conveyed himself away, and a multitude being in that place. Afterwards, the Messiah findeth him in the temple after a little while, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole. I healed you. Sin no more, lest the worst thing come unto thee. Christ taught this man to sin no more. Transgress the 10 commandments no more, because that's what he was doing. To sin is transgression of the law. What law? The 10. Christ taught this man to sin no more. He said, you know what? I made you whole. Sin no more unless some worse. Do you know what that means, brothers and sisters, when Christ says something worse? That means that bad things come from sin. The Christians, these people, it is their job to ignore verses. Just keep on ignoring them, ignore, because it's up to their survival. These people do this for survival. Lie. Christ told the man, afterwards the Messiah findeth him in the temple, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more. Do not commit sin, lest a worse thing come unto thee. That means if you sin, something bad may happen to you than what has already happened. Could die. But anyway, Christ told this man not to sin anymore. We don't see what these Christians are, we don't understand. Christ told this man, do not transgress the law anymore. That's what he's saying. Sin no more. That's what that means. Why would Christ tell this man not to sin anymore if he knew his sacrifice at the cross? Come on now. John 8. I'm doing this again. I did this class a year ago. I'm doing it again. Now, here we go. John 8:3. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. She was caught breaking the 10. This is the 10 of the 10. I don't see nothing, the 10. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? Now they're testing Christ, because Christ is not about human condemnation. The Pharisees were able to commit condemnation on those that broke the 10. That power. But Christ wasn't about that. Christ brought grace, not the rocks. That's what the Christians don't understand. The law of Moses permitted for them to kill that woman for adultery, but Christ didn't come with that. You're going to see, Christ was set up to forgive this woman for her sin. She was caught breaking the 10, but pay attention. This, they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. You're not about the law of Moses. You're someone else. But the Messiah stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. I ain't paying no attention. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin, the transgression of the law among you, let him cast the first stone. Now who it is? And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even to the last, and the Messiah was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. You know what? These men that were trying to kill this woman were in sin themselves. Isn't that something? See, this is why we don't pay attention to anytime you can't even execute the law because you're in sin, You see what system this is. This is a system. This is a system that this man right here is caught in. These guys are already guilty. But I want you to pay attention. Verse 10. When the Messiah had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? Has no man judged you to death? Because that's what you were supposed to do, die. But I came with grace, and I spared you. But when I did that, watch this. Verse 11. She said, No man, Lord. And the Messiah said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. This is the second time Christ spoke the words, sin no more. Do not transgress the law anymore in the ear of a person. And this man right here act like these two verses don't exist. Christ said, sin no more. Do not commit sin. Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Do not sin again. This is what we're facing here. It's funny, brothers and sisters, how that is. You have the Lord and Savior teaching people not to transgress the law. The Messiah, see, this is why we tell you, this Messiah here, he died on the cross according to the Caucasian. He died on the cross according to his descendant for your sins, past, present, and future. But here, Christ says, go and sin no more. Christ didn't understand that he would just die and you can stay on your sin. No, Christ taught him not to and her not to sin anymore, according to chapter and verse. Christianity is finished. These people, you could either, a lot of our people are going to be fooled because our people will never be able to understand that this is an enemy of God. It's not hatred, he's an enemy. Psalms 83 and 6. But I want to go to 1 Corinthians. Let's go to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 15. Verse 33. Be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners. And this is what the Christian church is, evil communication. But pay attention. Awake to righteousness and sin not. Wait a minute. Here's Paul. Paul says, awake to righteousness. Well, what is righteousness? Let's just a couple of verses. Just a couple of verses. The book of Psalms 119. Verse 44. The righteousness of thy testimonies is everlasting. The righteousness of his laws is everlasting. Give me understanding, that and I shall live. So the righteousness of thy testimony is everlasting. The righteousness of thy testimonies is everlasting. So the righteousness is God's laws, testimonies. Let's hold on. Let's get verse 172. Psalms 119, verse 172, my tongue shall speak of thy word, for all thy commandments are righteousness. So all the commandments of God are righteousness. All the commandments. Every last one of them. Isaiah 51, verse 7. He's talking to Israel here. Hearken unto me, ye that know righteousness, the people in whose heart is my law. See, righteousness is law. The righteousness of God is in the law. Whether it's in or of, the righteousness of God is of the law or in the law, both mean the same thing. Hearken unto me, ye that know righteousness, the people in whose heart is my law. Fear ye not the reproach of men, neither be ye afraid of their revilings or revelings, their anger, like we're going to receive later. Let's just keep going on. So let's get Philippians 3 and verse 5. Circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law of Pharisee. So Paul was a Pharisee. He supported animal sacrifice and temple worship until he was blind on the road to Damascus in Acts 9. Y'all have to realize that. But watch this. Concerning zeal, he was zeal of that law, persecuting the church. He was persecuting the church, Acts 9. Touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. The righteousness is still in the New Testament in the law. The righteousness is still in the law without sin, blameless. Because when he says persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless, that was sinless. The church he persecuted, keeping the righteousness which is in the law still without sin, is what Paul did. Blameless is without sin. But the point is, the righteousness is still in the law. Just like in the Old Testament. Romans 2, and I want to start in verse 25. For circumcision of the flesh verily profiteth, if thou keep the law. But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is become uncircumcision. Now, how can the circumcision that was taken of the foreskin of the flesh, he's made uncircumcised again? Is he putting the foreskin of the flesh back on? No, this is of the heart. Therefore, if the uncircumcision which is of the heart keep the righteousness of the law, the righteousness is still of the law. This man here, he reads what he wants. Both testaments, either the righteousness is still in the law or of the law. It's there, and you see it. Therefore, if the uncircumcision which is of the heart, those who we call Gentiles, see, they know they're Gentiles here, but all of a sudden now, see, this is what we be telling you. The state or condition of being uncircumcised, people who are not circumcised, Gentiles. That's all that meant. So when we go back up, therefore, if the uncircumcision, the uncircumcised Israelites, Jews, keep the righteousness of the law, so the righteousness is still of the law. Both testaments, in or of, whichever one you want to choose. It didn't change. Shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? So let's go back. Let's go back to 1 Corinthians 15. Verse 34. Awake to righteousness and sin not. Awake to the law and sin not against the law. This is what Paul said. Do not commit sin. For some have not the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. He says it. Some have not the knowledge of God. For I speak this to your shame. Knowledge of God. Knowledge of God. Where does the knowledge of God come from? Psalms 119. Verse 66. Teach me good judgment and knowledge, for I have believed in thy commandments. Because that is where knowledge came from. That's why David wrote through the Spirit, for I have believed in thy commandments, because judgment and knowledge came from the law. See, it's right here. Teach me good judgment and knowledge, for I have believed, which is had faith, or I have kept thy commandments, because that's where the knowledge comes from. Law. Malachi. We're going to give it to you straight right here. Malachi 2. If you can't understand this, whatever. Malachi 2, verse 7. For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth. For he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. Plain and simple. The knowledge comes from the law. That's where it comes from. So when we go back to 1 Corinthians 15, verse 34. Awake, which is rise up out of sleep, to righteousness and sin not. So again, the third verse, where we can see where Christ and Paul taught not to sin. This is what you're seeing. They were teaching them not to transgress the law. Let's go to the book of Ephesians. Let's go to the book of Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 4. Verse 24. And that ye put on the new man, which is after God, which after God is created in righteousness. What is righteousness in? The law. In righteousness. Righteousness is in the law. We just read it in Romans 2:26 and Philippians 3:6. From the Old to New Testament, the righteousness is still in the law. And that ye put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be ye angry and sin not. Wait a minute. The fourth time we read in the Bible, sin not. Paul again is teaching them not to sin. Let not the sun go down on your wrath. This is the fourth verse. The fourth verse. That we see where Paul and the combination of Christ taught. Christ spoke it twice. Paul spoke it twice. Sin not. Don't transgress God's law, because that's what sin is, transgression of the 10 Commandments. We read it. So when we look at, when we go back to Psalms, just real quick, I want to go here. Psalms 4. Verse 1. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayers. O ye sons of men, how long will ye turn my glory into shame? How long will ye love vanity, which is sin? Proverbs 22:8. And seek after leasing. But know that the Lord has set apart him that is godly. See, godly is the opposite of ungodly. So let's look at this. Let's look and see who the Psalms 1 and 5. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. Ungodly is equal to sinners. They're the same as sinners. Now, let's look at the two words together. I'm going to make you see that the ungodly are sinners. Let's get the book of Jude, chapter 1, verse 15. To execute judgment upon all. Now, we're looking to see who the ungodly are by chapter and verse, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches, which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. And the ungodly are sinners. The ungodly are sinners. So we go back to Psalms 4. We go back to Psalms 4 real quick. Psalms 4, verse 3. But know that the Lord has set apart him that is law keeping, because that's who the godly are. The ungodly are sinners, but the godly are law keepers for himself. See, godly means these keep the law, because the ungodly are sinners. They can't mean the same thing. See, these are the simple things that this man doesn't want you to understand. The milk that you need to get the clear understanding. See, they have you eating fake meat and miss the milk. The fake meat is their philosophy, their tongue, their mouth, what they did this day, that day. No. Let's go back up. But know that the Lord has set apart him that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear him The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Pay attention now. Stand in awe and sin not. This is the point. Stand in awe and sin not. This is where Paul and Christ got it from. They were doing this in the Old Testament. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Be at peace. Salah. Sin not. Whether it was the prophets or the apostles, they taught the people not to sin against the law. And it was for a good reason. Let's go back to Ephesians real quick. I want to get through reading that again. Ephesians 4. Verse 26. Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Neither give place to the devil, because that is how you'll give place to the devil if you transgress the law. Why do you think John, you got to read the Bible, brothers. So why do you think 1 John 3. Now, 1 John 3, again, verse 4. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is transgression of the law. Now, pay attention. He that committeth sin is of the devil. See, he that committeth the transgression of the law is of the devil. If you transgress God's law, you are of the devil. That's why they try to stay with Paul. They don't want to go to John. They don't want to go to Jude. They don't want to go to James. They don't want to go to Peter. They want to go to Paul. Because if Christianity, this man will get caught. He'll get caught. You can't tell me he that committed sin is of the devil. If you commit sin, you're of the devil. That's why, back to Ephesians 4. Verse 26, be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. Because if you sin, if you transgress the law, you will be giving place to the devil. That's why Paul taught not to sin, so you wouldn't give place to the devil. Isn't this something? Let's get 1 Peter. First Peter 4. Verse 1. I want you to pay attention. Forasmuch then as Christ has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. When Christ suffered for us in the flesh, the true Israelites, arm yourselves with the same mind. We got to have the same mind. That's why I think let's look at this real quick. Philippians 2, verse 5. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ the Messiah. See, let this mind be in you. Let you have the same mind as your Messiah. Be willing to have the same mind as the Messiah. And when you do, let's go back. 1 Peter 4. Verse 1. Forasmuch then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. The same mind as Christ. And he's going to tell you how. For he that has suffered like Christ in the flesh has ceased from sin. If you suffer in the flesh, Peter says you're going to stop sinning. Peter also taught that us suffering in the flesh, we need to cease from transgressing the law. If we're going to suffer for Christ, we got to stop sinning. We got to stop transgressing the law, the stealing, the killing, the adultery, the breaking of the Sabbath, the honoring other gods, the honoring of other gods. White Christ. White image from an Edomite pastor. His descendants. This is who they are. This is our problem as black people. We honor this man as Christ, and he's not. It's not biblical. So behind this man is another doctrine. But 1 Peter 4:1, forasmuch then as Christ has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. Let this mind be in you. Philippians 2:5. For he that has suffered as Christ in the flesh as Christ has ceased from sin, meaning you have stopped sinning. Cease means to stop. Stop. That's what cease means, to stop. Stop sinning. Let's go back to, I wanted this one first, but I could have started here. The book of First Peter. The book of First Peter 2. Verse 21. For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example, that ye should follow in his steps, that ye should follow in his steps, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. So to follow his steps, meaning who did no sin, which meaning, again, brothers and sisters, is telling you, we cannot transgress the law. If we're following in the footsteps of Christ, we're not transgressing the law, because he didn't. He didn't transgress the law. If you're going to follow Christ, Christ did no sin, nor guile was found in his mouth. It doesn't look like excuses here, brothers and sisters, like these Christians put up. See, when you're looking, when you look at how it works, going to this, it's funny how they do it. Because I've been with this, brothers and sisters, all this time, and it just, let's look at this. Again, what is the forgiveness of sins through the cross? Summary. The Christian doctrine of forgiveness is that God has lifted the sentence of condemnation upon Christians for their sins through the death of Christ on their behalf, and no longer counts them guilty. Forgiveness is necessary both because God is just and because all humans are guilty with sin. See, this is their doctrine. God forgives your sin at the cross. This is what this here is what this man is teaching his people along with our people. But every time you go to the Bible, 1 Peter 2:21, for even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example, that ye should follow in his steps, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. So to follow in the steps of Christ, we're not sinning. Over and over and over, the Bible continues to tell us not to sin, not to transgress the law. 1 John 2. Verse 1. My little children, this is John now, these things write I unto you, that ye sin not. How many times are we going to see this? They taught them not to sin. Verse after verse after verse after verse, they taught them not to sin. And if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, the Messiah, Christ, the righteous. My little children, these things write unto you, that ye sin not. That means you don't transgress the law. Do not transgress the law. This is what you're reading. Don't. But somehow, some way, this where do they get the right to change the Bible at will? The book of 1 Timothy 5:19. Against an elder receive not an accusation, but before 2 or 3 witnesses. Them that sin transgress the law, rebuke before all. That others also may fear. So you're to rebuke transgressors of the law. Paul said you're to rebuke the transgressors of the law, not accept them. Come as you are style, like this man. Them that sin rebuke before all, that others may fear. You're to rebuke those that transgress the law. Easily spoken, right? Now, why do you think they taught them not to sin? Why do you think this? Why? And brothers and sisters, we really can't see how Christians try to, but this is what they'll do. They'll worm their way around it. We're not going to let them worm their way. Hebrews 10:26. For if we sin willfully, if we transgress the 10 commandments willfully, after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins. We're going to read this again. If we sin, which is transgress the law willfully, after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins, making this a lie. This here is a lie. What is forgiveness of sins? Through the cross. This doctrine of sin being forgiven at the cross, the finished work, is a work of this man here to keep you in sin. That's all that is. There is no way they can avoid, if we sin willfully after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins. Who sacrificed? Christ. There remaineth no more sacrifice. His sacrifice for sin. The true Christ. If you continue in your sins willfully, if you continue to keep Easter, Christmas, baby day, dog day, cat day, bird day, desk day, tree day, book day, wall day, picture day, TV day, whatever day that's not biblical, Christ's sacrifice will profit you nothing. But this is what you'll see. But a certain fearful looking of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the adversaries. You've already been told that you're going to be put into the lake of fire. If you continue to sin, you're going to die. But a certain fearful looking for of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the enemies of God, which is this man here according to Psalms 83:6. Edom is an enemy. Yoga flame. Time for God to get the cooking. All right. For if we sin willfully after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins. Christ's sacrifice will not profit you anything. But a certain fearful looking for the day of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the adversary. So how, brothers and sisters, this is how we want you to, we're looking at this. How does this doctrine stack up here that they've taught? Summary: the Christian doctrine of forgiveness is that God has lifted the sentence of condemnation upon Christians for their sins through the death of Christ on their behalf and no longer counts them as guilty. Up. For if we sin willfully after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins. That looked like the cross completed the job. It did not complete the job. Christ dying on the cross did not complete the job. Edom is just trying to carry as many people with him as he can to the lake of fire, because that's where he's going. People think when you look at Psalms, the Bible isn't playing. The book of Psalms 112. Psalms 112. In verse 10. The wicked shall see it and be grieved. He shall gnash with his teeth and melt away. Melt away is by fire. He's going to actually melt away like wax melteth with fire. His skin, his teeth, his bones. The desire of the wicked shall perish. That's fire. It's already been written. It's going to be by fire. Bottom line. So I'm going to go to, just to get it real quick, I'm going to go to the book of 2 John. 2 John. You guys pay attention. 2 John 1, verse 9. Whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ. If you transgress the law, you're not abiding in the doctrine of Christ, hath not God. So if you transgress, you do not abide in the doctrine of Christ, and you don't have God if you sin. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he has both the Father and the Son. So if you abide in the doctrine, you have both the Father and Son. If you abide in the doctrine. Right? Yeah. You can't transgress God's law and call yourself following him. The Bible taught them not to sin, because if they did, Christ's sacrifice would profit them nothing. Nada. If you transgress the law and abide not in the doctrine which is teaching of Christ. So if you transgress, you don't abide in the teaching of Christ, and you hath not God. The Bible, the New Testament teaches that you should not sin. But these are the verses that this man holds back. This is why there's no use of battling him, talking to him, nor his women. It's all an act. If you transgress God's law, let's go to 2 Peter. Second Peter. Verse 13. And shall receive the reward of unrighteousness. Unrighteousness is sin. As they count it, unrighteousness is sin. 1 John 5:17. As they count it pleasure to riot in the daytime. Spots they are and blemishes. Sins. This is spots. Sporting themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you. Yeah, coming around you, knowing they're fake. Having eyes full of adultery and cannot cease from sin. These people cannot cease from sin. They can't stop. They can't cease from sin. Beguiling unstable souls. People that don't read the Bible, don't care really, but they want to try to, Jesus Christ, yes, Christ. Don't even read the Bible. A heart they have exercised with covetous practices. Cursed children. So Peter calls them Peter calls them that cannot cease from sin cursed children. Cursed. And it right up with Psalms again. I'm going to go back here. Psalms 19. Verse 21. Thou hast rebuked the proud that are cursed, which do err from thy commandments. So the proud that are cursed for the reason of breaking the law, that's why they were cursed. See the law, and it doesn't change. Thou hast rebuked the proud that are cursed, which do err from thy commandments. If you err from the law, you're cursed. You're a cursed individual. Cursed. Proverbs 3:33, the curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked, the sinner. But he blesses the habitation of the just. See, brothers and sisters, the Old Testament has been telling you, if you break God's law, you're cursed. And when you go to see the New Testament, see, we always talk about, oh, well, the New Testament is different. Christ. No. We keep letting this man right here and his foolishness. We keep on letting this man right here get to us. This is what's going on. This man. Let's go back to 2 Peter 2. Verse 14. Having eyes full of adultery, that's the breaking of the 10 commandments, and cannot cease from sin. See, the 10 commandments, if you sin against them, you will be sinning against the 10. Having eyes full of adultery, of the 10, that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls, and heart they have exercised with covetous practices, cursed children. If you are in sin, you're still cursed in the New Testament. There it is right here. You can't. Pow. Our people have to wake up from it. We hope they do. We can't be caught in sin, or there's going to be consequences. All praises to the Most High, brothers and sisters. I'm your host, the Apostle Reuben of IUPR Bible Radio Podcasting. Out of Little Rock, Arkansas, to the saints of the Most High God. 2 Timothy 2:5. If a man also strive for masteries, yet he is not crowned, except he strive lawfully. IUPR Bible Radio teaches all scripture from Old to New Testament. We realize that the scriptures may offend a lot of people, but we must teach all things, adding nor taking away nothing. Brothers and sisters, we'll see you soon. All praise to the Most High God. Let's get back together and read the Bible again.